I thank everyone for tuning in this morning. On the program today is multi-talented producer, songwriter, vocalist, instrumentalist, Grammy-nominated performer. We welcome to the program Robert Berry. Robert Brian C., thanks for your time this morning.
Hey, Brian, how are you? I got to tell you, you are full of energy. It's 8 o'clock in the morning here in the West Coast, but I'm ready. I'm up.
I know. No, it's my gasoline to get this show moving.
Yeah, fantastic.
So I want to begin, Robert. Talk about your roots in music. I understand you come from a family of musicians, and it began for you at an early age. Is that right?
You know, my mom sang in my dad's band, and they didn't tell the band that my mom was pregnant. She was about 8 months pregnant. So I was actually on the stage before I was born. Yeah, I'm definitely a musical family.
And your dad owning a music shop in California, and that's where stars would walk in. Talk about that experience for you and your dad's music shop and all of that.
Well, you know, picture this. I'm 8 years old, 9 years old, you know, starting to see that girls. And these rock stars are walking to my dad's store to see the kind of amplifiers and guitars the Beatles used, Vox. And they all have these gorgeous girlfriends, and they're, you know, dressed kind of in the 60s, psychedelic, whatever it is. And I'm going, wow, but music's been in my life. I have 8 years of classical piano lessons, 2 years of jazz. And I'm going, this looks like a good way to go. So, I mean, I was sentenced to music. My life in music, there was no other choice for me.
And reading a little bit about your career, I did read that you really never learned or rehearsed at a young age. By the age of 12, you had teenagers taking you into the music scene. Is that correct?
I had only played classical piano up to the point of being 12 years old. But one of my friends in school told his brother, who was an 18-year-old senior in high school, that I would be a good keyboard player for his band. And really, the bottom line was they thought they'd get free Vox equipment from my dad's music store. So they got this little 12-year-old kid into their band playing frat houses at colleges and stuff at 12. But it gave me a head start. I mean, a huge head start. And look at this. These guys already knew how to have a band going. They knew how to start it, how to get gigs, how to make it work. At 12, you know, you start a band and you don't know what to do with it. So I got way ahead with that happening for me.
All right, so talk about the group Hush. Talk a little bit about the group, how you got involved with Hush.
It was, had a couple of different bands, and I'm in Silicon Valley here, San Jose. It wasn't Silicon Valley so much then, but in the mid-'70s, two bands were playing a lot of gigs, and a booking agent thought, if I could put two members each of that band together, those bands, I could get a great band, and they'd probably get all the gigs. He did that. We learned 20 minutes. I think a showcase is 20 minutes where we played a chorus of like 10 songs, you know, just the chorus. We learned, you know, listen to music by Doobie Brothers, Nights of White Satin by Moody Blues, all this old music. And we went into these showcases for high schools and colleges, and we got all the gigs. I mean, the band was really good. The problem was the gigs started in 2 or 3 weeks, and we only knew the choruses from each song. So we had to really learn all, you know, 2 sets worth of music by that time. But from there, we turned into an original band. We're doing progressive rock, had a little record contract, toured. It was really my first professional band, and it did really well for being starting here in San Jose, California.
Right. So Hush was basically a progressive rock cover band. And after that, now you started the Robert Berry Band.
Yeah, you know, it was funny. Hush did so much. When we went on tour with Triumph, we won a BAMI here, which was a big award in California. We had the 3 albums, and there was sort of nowhere to go with it. It just wasn't going to go any farther. A record pressing plant that made vinyl albums wanted my business. I have a recording studio. I started very young, and they wanted my business. They said, we'll give you 500 albums if you give us, you know, a client. Well, I couldn't do that for people I knew, so I gave them 10 songs that I had in my drawer that were mine that Hush couldn't do. They just weren't right for Hush, and I didn't think they were any good. I had this record plant press these albums. When I got it back, my friend Rob Fowler, who still does my website, he got a copy because he had done the cover for me, and he got a bunch of them and sent them out to record companies and to managers. wound up getting Herbie Herbert, Journey's manager, to be my manager. It wound up that these songs were exactly what I should be doing and what fit my voice better and were much deeper and more well written, where Carl Palmer heard them. And I got, well, that's the next part of the story, isn't it? Carl Palmer.
Amazing. We're talking with progressive rock icon Robert Berry, who's with us this morning. 1988, Robert, is really when you got into the spotlight because, as you mentioned, you teamed up with Carl Palmer. It was also Keith Emerson.
Yes.
And you formed the band 3. Talk about that experience in your life and your career.
Man, I got to tell you, to keep up with your energy when Dish got up, I'm only halfway through my coffee. I'm struggling, Brian, but I'm trying.
I know it's early. I appreciate it so much.
Oh no, I'm glad to be talking to you. You know, Carl and I were trying to start a band because he heard that album that actually was on a cassette tape too at Geffen Records through a guy named John Kolodner, who was a guru there at Geffen. He just did everything. Fantastic guy. And Carl called me and said, look, I want to start a new band. I really like your voice, the songs, and let's try to do something. We tried and tried. Nothing really, nothing clicked. And, when you're at Carl's level, there has to be some kind of chemistry. He had done it all, And finally, in a roundabout way, Keith Emerson called me. I was living in London then and said, hey, Carl, play me your cassette tape. I'd like to have lunch. Let's talk about it. So it sounds easy, doesn't it? It kind of, when I look back at it, it just kind of all flowed along and boom, there it was. But Carl, Keith, and I started a band called 3, made an album for Geffen Records and had a top 10 song. And it really put me on the map and launched me in a way I could never dream. In the music world, even for my recording studio, the stamp of approval playing with a Keith Emerson and a Carl Palmer was huge. So it was a great time in my life.
And you also played with Sammy Hagar.
That was a funny thing. Sammy had left his band behind to join Van Halen. Geffen Records, first of all, wanted me to sort of replace Sammy, not as a Sammy Hagar, because I'm not the kind of artist that he is, but his band was really good. And they had called me. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I was heading to London to work with Carl. So I said, no, I can't do that, but thanks. 3 years later, when I came back from London, they are still looking for somebody. And we formed a band called Alliance, which is still going today. We're all just friends that every 5 to 6 years, 7 years, an album comes out. In the meantime, now Van Halen was trying to get rid of Sammy Hagar with all that tension they had, and they wouldn't let him use Michael Anthony as the bass player in the solo shows. But since I was basically working with his old band, he said, hey, do you mind doing, the bass for me for a while I straighten this out? So for a couple of years, I played with Sam. And now, after all these years, when you see him in his Circle band, which is fantastic with Jason Bonham on drums, Michael Anthony on bass, the keyboard part you hear coming out of the speakers, I actually did for him, pre-recorded all of Van Halen keyboard stuff. So I'm sort of still in the band.
Wow. And besides Sammy Hagar, you performed with Boston, Night Ranger. Did you learn? You must have learned so much from these legendary artists, huh?
The interesting thing, I have so much music. So, starting with classical, my dad had a big band, Frank Sinatra kind of stuff. When I first started in recording studios, about 18 years old, I was recording mariachi bands because the studio was downtown San Jose. I worked in hard rock bands. I played pop stuff in nightclubs to buy a car, right? I've been exposed to so much music, and I play a lot of instruments. So my toolbox for music is super big, super full, and I'm like a sponge. I love every bit of it. And I think a lot of that stems from being on stage before I was born. It's just part of who I am, part of my DNA. And I absorb it all, whoever I work with, like with Keith. Keith knew that I played because I played, in front of him. We're writing songs, and every day I was with Keith Emerson writing and touring and stuff. It was like a piano lesson to me. I go, oh, that's how he does that. Oh, look at that. How does he do that? I could never do that kind of thing, So, yeah, I've been inspired by everybody.
Now, there was a period in your life, Robert, you're native, as you mentioned, Northern California at a young age, and then you went over to the UK, right? You went over to the UK, and you met guitarist Steve Howe.
Yeah, again, it seems easy. It sort of was. It just flowed along. I moved there so Carl and I could start a band, Carl Palmer, and we weren't finding the right people. And all of a sudden, Steve Howe from Yes and Steve Hackett from Genesis had a band called GTR. And Hackett left. And I'm over there, and Carl and I don't have a band yet. So the manager, Brian Lane, who was my manager then, said, Steve Howe would like to have lunch with you. Wow. I was a huge Yes fan. Sure, I'll have lunch with Steve. I went over his house, and he gave me 2 songs. He goes, we need a guy, and I like your cassette tape at the time. And, it seems funny to say that, a cassette tape, although they're coming back now, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy. I don't know where you find a cassette player, I guess, in a pawn shop. But I got a couple songs of Steve's. I totally rewrote them. For some reason, I felt that if I do exactly what I think should happen with this music Steve's written, and I do it the way I think that will shine, and I don't consider that Steve was in Yes and, that I'm going to make it sound like Yes, or I don't fake it. I just do it for real. If he hates it, okay, we didn't have anything. But if he likes it, we would have a great writing partnership because he would like what I brought to the table, and just like what he brought to the table, giving me the song that he wrote his way, And it worked. It was magic. Some of the best material I've been involved in, and he was a super guy. The only reason I didn't stay with Steve in that is the singer of that band made my life miserable. And even though I hadn't had my big break with Keith Emerson yet, I knew that there was something better for me. I don't know how I knew, but I just said, I'm not going to stay here. I'm leaving this band. I'm going to head home. Something will come along where I'm really comfortable. I can't explain why I do that, because at that point, I had no hit record. Didn't even really have a band that was touring. I was just writing and recording.
Wow. So we'll take a little break from the questions. I'll let you have your coffee, and we're going to play a quick little mix of your new release. Is that okay?
Cool. Yeah, fantastic.
All right. Let's hear Robert Berry.
What no man sees, in the silence inside I run open and free. A road full of dreams, like wind through my head. In the beauty around me, we're planting the seeds. You empower me to be whole. Like this, not a word so mean at the scene so stressed. Here we are in a hurricane, just swirling around, nowhere to suspend. We can see it in a cynical way, where many stand in anxiety land. Never gotta see when the going gets tough, so I'm running high, saying nothing's enough.
listeners, you just heard Robert Berry, Third Impressions, under the name 3-2. Great stuff, Robert. How long did it take you to put this together? How proud are you of your work?
You know, this album is the third album in the 3 series that Keith Emerson, Carl Palmer, and I started in 1988. It was 27 years later that Keith and I did the next one. That's what we call it, 3.2, because only 2 of us. Carl was out doing his own thing. And that album is called The Rules Have Changed. And it did so well that the record company asked me to do another one. Now, the sad news was that in the middle of The Rules Have Changed, the last album, Keith died, and I wasn't going to do another one. And the company said, you know, The Rules Have Changed did so well, you really should do a follow-up. And I said, well, I just, he's gone. It was upsetting. It was very hard to finish the last one. They said, it did so well, you really should do it. Think about it. So I had one song, which was the last one you played there, Never, that Keith and I had worked on that I hadn't used for The Rules Have Changed. So that's a 9-minute piece just about of music there. And I'm very proud of this. I was a little worried about putting it out after Keith was gone, and what would people think of the album, because The Rules Have Changed did so well. You hate to mess up a stunning record, so to speak. But I took a chance, and this is doing really well too. People are liking it. It's full of all kinds of things. You played a couple of the really long ones. The first song you played, and the last song you played of the album, they're both almost 9 minutes. And in between is some stuff that's, there's a 2.5 minute, a 4 minute song, and more typical length songs. And people are going with it. And there's even a jazz song in the middle that people are really liking called Emotional Trigger, which is, of course, a little bit more about what's going on today. But I'm very proud of it. It's really been a great ride on this album. This is the last 3 album there'll ever be, 3.2. I won't do another one. I don't have any other material that I wrote with Keith. And I believe that it should end here.
Wow. So for the audience listening right now, where can they purchase the new album?
It's available everywhere. Amazon, it sold out in the first week on Amazon. It got in the Billboard charts a couple weeks. The record company Frontiers is in Italy. So on my website, which is the easiest way to find things, I think, because it's everywhere, but just go to robertberry.com and you'll see everything that's available on it. T-shirts and vinyl is coming on it. I'm so proud of this that the record company wasn't going to do a vinyl 12-inch, so I got the rights to do it myself. And I'm putting it out, and it's only on the website, and there's only going to be 200 of them. I know that's a small number, but I want this to be really scarce and really rare because so many people are getting the CD and the downloads. I thought, let's make this really kind of a special vinyl. So 100 of them are already pre-ordered, so I only have 100 left I can be able to sell once it comes in.
Well, now you're a man that wears many hats, and I know you've done a lot of organization for dozens of sessions, tribute albums, bands such as Rush, Pink Floyd, Genesis, Jethro Tull. Any plans, upcoming tour events that you have scheduled?
I do have what we call the 3.2 featuring Robert Berry. It's a band of great musicians. Andrew Collier actually lives in New York, upper state New York there. Jimmy Keegan, the drummer from L.A., and Paul Keller, the guy that I play with in Hush, guitar player, and the guy that went on tour with Keith, Carl, and I, is our guitar player. And we did a tour in 2019, very successful, mostly East Coast and West Coast. And we were supposed to be in Europe in 2020. I don't have to tell everybody what happened to that. They all got canceled, So we already have something booked April of next year, a festival, and things are getting booked now. But, the agencies and the venues are still being a little bit careful because they don't want to have all these tickets purchased or all this stuff set up and then have it canceled. So in the next, I think, couple months, we'll see a lot of shows added for everybody. Everybody's going to be out there playing. We can't wait for live music, right?
Yeah, it's about time. It definitely is, Yeah. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the program, you're a multi-talented artist. I know around 1985, you also contributed songs to a number of film soundtracks, including Anthony Michael Hall, Out of Bounds. How was that experience for you?
That was when Geffen Records was first starting to groom me as a solo artist before I met Carl Palmer. And John Kalodner over there, who is an A&R guy, sort of saw me as a Sting meets Bryan Adams kind of guy. Straight rock like Bryan Adams, but more creative like Sting, and sort of a mixture of the two. And that was part of that period. It was only a year before he played the, again, cassette tape for Carl Palmer and, of course, Sammy Hagar's band. So it was a lot of fun. I went around the country doing different things, and did a TV show with Cher in the old days, just an appearance, and things I never dreamed at that point in my life that I'd be doing. You know, it was really a great experience. Geffen Records and John Kalodner really kickstarted the whole thing for me before Keith Emerson put that little icing on the cake.
Now, I understand that you're also a collector of instruments. You're a collector of guitars. Is that accurate to say?
At least, yeah.
Yes. So what's your preference of choice as far as gear goes on stage?
You know, on stage, I play a lot of instruments. You know that. But on stage, I really I'm the bass player singer. That's where I resonate. And it's changed so much. You know, used to be I'd have a huge SVT Ampeg bass amp and a few pedals and things. Now I have this little tiny Hartke bass amp with a 15-inch speaker with it says 50 pounds, and the thing just is smoking hot. It sounds so good. Instruments and everything, of course, in-ear monitors. Now we don't have floor monitors anymore. It's changed so much. But I prefer playing Steinberger as my bass. There's something about the graphite bass neck that really fits my hand well. And the music's complicated, and singing and playing at the same time, it needs to be comfortable so I don't have to think about the playing, concentrating on the singing. So, yeah, the Steinberger bass is the thing. But, my God, I bought 7 basses for the tour in 2019, just trying to find the one that fit my hand where it was effortless. I didn't have to think about the bass so much. And I couldn't find anything that worked better than that Steinberger.
Now, when you record in the studio, do you use the Steinberger or you use something else? I have quite a few. I have 140 guitars, so about 30 of those are basses. I'll tell you, I have a Hofner bass, the old Paul McCartney Hofner. Right. Sometimes I'll use that. There's nothing deeper and rounder than a Hofner bass. It's an amazing sound. Of course, I have a Fender, precision and jazz bass. I play with a guy named Greg Kinn. I use a jazz bass because it's a 4-string. My Steinberger is a 5-string, and Greg Kinn is simpler music. So the 4-string really just is the instrument to use. And I'll use that in the studio too, a jazz bass. So a lot of Fenders. It just depends. I have a Washburn, which Washburn, that's not a great guitar. Well, Sammy Hagar, when I was working with him, had this specially made for me, and it has the best pickups and everything. It is such a great bass. I'll use that a lot of times. It's a 5-string. It's one of a kind, so I can't really say, "Oh, you got to look at this. Go down to Guitar Center." Yeah, no. And the final question, I have a couple of minutes left. So, what's left in your career? Any future accomplishments? Book on the horizon? Yeah. What's new?
That tour in 2019, the first time I had played my 30-year history was the 3.2 featuring Robert Berry Band. And I've always been with somebody else, and it's been my music, and, I sing it. But this was everything. We did 2 hours all the way back to 1987 with GTR, then 3, and Little Ambrosia, and all the stuff, 2 hours of it. And it was so much fun to go out and play that and have people not just bring a 3 album, or a 3.2 album even, but they brought old Hush albums to get signed. And I got to thank everybody kind of face to face for a great career in music. I wouldn't have it if people didn't buy the music and like it. And I want to continue that. That's why next year, starting in April, and hopefully we go and rekindle that European tour that got canceled. And after that, we'll see what comes next.
Well, I appreciate your time this morning, Robert. Great job on the new release, and we'll plug it here on the program.
Brian, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your energy. I'm glad you liked the album, and we were in New York, but we'll get there again, and maybe I can meet you in person, shake your hand.
Oh, looking forward.
We can shake hands now, right? We've been vaccinated. We got more spray.
Looking forward, sir. Thanks so much.
Man. Thanks.
Take care.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Website is robertberry.com. And again, Robert has just released on Frontier Records his new album of new music entitled Third Impression under the name 3-2. robertberry.com. Thanks, Robert. Until next week, happy collecting to all.